when I did my taxes for the very first time, I was overwhelmed and I was like, oh no, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just clicking buttons here and there.
Another big mistake is not filing at all. Maybe being in the US and, assuming, okay, well, I didn't receive any income, I didn't work, I don't have a scholarship, I'm just studying, I don't need to do anything. They do. Everyone needs to do something when it comes to taxes as a non-resident.
What happens if we don't do it?
If you were starting a new job in the US and you wanted to ensure that you're taxed correctly, you can actually use Sprintax forms to generate those pre-employment tax forms for you.
What happens if I made an income but also invested in stocks? Because as an F1 student, I am eligible to invest. At that point of time, do I still have to report that?
As a non-resident filing Form 1040-NR, if there's a tax treaty benefit available to them, they'll be able to claim that through the 1040-NR. If it's a case you've got a dependent, that's been in the US, present with you in the US in 2024, but they didn't receive any income, they too need to submit Form 8843 if they haven't received any income in the US.
Thank you, Elvira, for doing this. I am excited. I think you're the first one expert in talking about F1 visa, filing taxes on F1 visa, and as an international student. But before we get started, let's do like a quick intro. Who are you? And and what do you do?
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much for having me. My name is Elvira King, and I'm an account manager here at Sprintax. I've worked with Sprintax now for over 6 years, so helping non-residents with their tax filing obligations, working with schools, institutions, universities across the US to ensure that their international populations are tax compliant. I'm Irish. I'm actually living here in Ireland, but I get a bit of the best of both worlds. I live here and I get to travel over there to meet partners and attend conferences and so on. So yeah, it's great.
That's amazing. Cool. And maybe for people who don't know, what is Sprintex, and like how does that help international students?
Of course, absolutely. So Sprintax is a specialized tax software designed especially for international students, scholars, non-resident workers in the US. So I suppose unlike general tax softwares, Sprintax is tailored uniquely for non-residents, who'll often have different tax obligations to residents. But I suppose one of the main reasons that students would use Sprintax rather than other apps out there is that it'll help them navigate the complex tax process, I suppose. For instance, non-resident students typically don't file taxes in the same way as a US resident.
Mm.
They may be eligible for specific tax treaties or exemptions, for example, and Sprintax is equipped to identify those situations and to ensure that the correct forms are generated and to maximize any potential refunds and avoid penalties. Um,
Yes.
it is a very user-friendly process as well, but I suppose Sprintax has the 24/7 live chat available, which is really invaluable in a situation like that where somebody may be uncomfortable with tax filing or a little
Mhm.
nervous. Maybe it's their first time filing, and they have plenty of resources there, in terms of support.
Yes, and I know we're gonna talk through the whole walkthrough of showing what it feels like, because I know when I did my taxes for the very first time, I was overwhelmed and I was like, oh no, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just clicking buttons here and there. So hopefully this podcast serves like as a tutorial walkthrough as well with some valuable information. And I know we have discount for students, so anybody I think who uses the link that we have in the description, or I'll put it in the over here as well, they get what's the discount? I think we have $5.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a $5 discount on the federal tax preparation. So if you use your code, so the code Yudi, enter that checkout, which I can show you a little later, that's going to remove $5 off the federal discount, or the federal preparation fee, I should say. So, once you enter the code, it'll provide the discount and then you just pay the balance at yourself at
Mhm.
checkout.
Yeah, and I know again, a lot of time people use different softwares which uses the form 1040 and 1040 NR. There's a big difference. Why is it important for us to use 1040 NR? And maybe you can explain what is 1040.
Course, absolutely. So the 1040 is the resident federal tax return, whereas the 1040 NR is the non-resident version of that. So it is
Mhm.
really, really important that they are filing the correct tax return. If they're non-resident, they need to submit a non-resident tax return. And if they're resident, obviously they submit a resident return. Obviously different, I suppose Form 1040 NR, the non-resident alien tax return, it's specifically for non-resident aliens, which is it's going to be the tax classification for most international students on an F1 visa. They'll fall into that category for their first number of years in the US. So they're
Mhm.
non-resident aliens, they're taxed only on income that is sourced within the US. So for example, if they've earned income from non-campus employment, or received a scholarship within the US or whatever, that's where that'll be reported on the 1040 NR. Another key thing to note, I suppose, is that non-resident aliens are eligible. They're not eligible for many of the tax credits that are available to US residents. Things like the earned income tax credit and so on. They won't be able to claim that. But as a non-resident filing Form 1040 NR, if there's a tax treaty benefit available to them, they'll be able to claim that through the 1040 NR. So
Yeah.
it's so important that they are submitting a correct return based on their residency status.
Yes, and again, just to clarify for the students, Form 1040 or 1040 NR, this is the form that you send it to IRS that, hey, hey IRS or hey government, this is the income I made. Here is the expenses I had. Here are the deduction, and this is why you owe me or I owe you. And that form basically describes all of this. Is that correct?
That's it exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So if they're non-resident and they're using the likes of TurboTax to prepare their forms, we'll prepare the 1040 NR for them. If they go through TurboTax and they enter their information in there, TurboTax would prepare the 1040, which is the resident return. So
Hmm.
really important, and like we would always stress it to ensure that you are filing a correct return. And if you're not sure, the easiest thing to do is to go into Sprintax, complete step one, and we'll work that out for them. And I can show you what that looks like in a little while. But in step one, we'll ask for everything we need to determine if they're resident or non-resident for tax. If they're
Hmm.
resident, we'll stop them there and we'll point them in the right direction. But if they're non-resident, then they can proceed on through Sprintax.
Amazing. Okay. Uh, I know typically, I think there's an understanding that if I made an income, then I need to file an income tax. But it is also possible that students who arrived in United States in fall semester and in the first semester, they did not make any income. For them, do they still have to do anything?
Absolutely, yeah. So all non-residents in the US, if they're in the US as an exempt individual, so on an F, J, M, or Q visa, if they've spent any time at all in the US during the tax year, even if they didn't receive income, they need to submit Form 8843. That's the minimum filing obligation with the IRS. It's
Mm,
basically a declaration of their non-resident status with the IRS to basically say, hey, my name is Elvira. I'm an F1 student. Because I'm still an exempt individual, I'm still non-resident for tax purposes, so please don't count these days of presence towards that substantial presence test. So
mm.
everybody, as a non-resident in the US, needs to submit Form 8843. But if they have received any US income over $0, they will trigger the federal filing requirement, which is the 1040 NR. So,
Mm.
everyone needs to do something when it comes to taxes as a non-resident.
Yes, and I think we're gonna show them the Form 8843 as well at the later part of the podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
exactly.
Uh, I know we talked about that what we should do, like 1040 NR and 8843. What happens if we don't do it? Like, let's say I didn't do 8843 for some reason, or I ended up using TurboTax because that's the name people have heard, and they ended up using 1040 instead of 1040 NR. What are some of the consequences?
Yeah, absolutely. And great question. So I suppose the first thing is that it's part of the visa requirements. So, you need to comply with all US laws, including IRS and filing tax forms, even if it is just Form 8843. So it's part of your visa conditions. I suppose the one we would always emphasize is the impact that it could have on your future immigration status. So, there may be anyone listening today that would like to stay in the US, apply for a change of status in future, And it is likely that you would be asked in for evidence of tax compliance in your visa interview. So we'd hate to see tax being something that would stop anyone from staying in the US. So with that said, it's so important that you are tax compliant, that your tax record is correct and up to date for every year that you've been in the US. On top of
Mm,
that, if it's a case you owe tax to the IRS and you're late filing, they could apply fees and penalties, and interest can accrue on that. But I suppose finally, they could also be due a refund. And this is the only way that you can get your refund is through submitting your tax return. So I
mhm.
suppose if it's a case that's for a number of years, and it happens a lot for anybody that may be listening today and have been in the US for a number of years and haven't filed, and we see it a lot. You'll often assume, okay, well, I'm in the US, I'm studying, I'm not receiving any income, I don't need to file. Why do I need to file? But it is important to be aware that you do need to do something when it comes to taxes. If you need to catch up,
Mm,
definitely catch up. You can file, you can back file for years that you've missed. If you've filed incorrectly, maybe use TurboTax to file a resident return in the past instead of a non-resident return. In that case, you'd need to submit an amended tax return to correct that and, bring your tax record correct and up to date. And I suppose both of these things are things that Sprintax can help with. So if you do need to,
okay, I was
yeah,
just
yeah,
do that. Like,
perfect,
does Sprintax help with
perfect.
that thing? Because I'm watching this video and I'm like, oh no, I need to go and back and do my amendment. But does
Mhm.
Sprintax help with it? And you answered it, so it looks like it does.
Absolutely, yeah. So of course, if you did need to catch up or you need to amend a return, you can log into your Sprintax account, select the year that you need to catch up on, we'll say. So select that year, answer the questions based on that year, and we'll generate the relevant forms for you. Now, you'd need to do that for
Mm,
each year that you need to catch up on. So you're answering the questions based on each year that you need to catch up on. If you need to file an
mm.
amended tax return, again, you log into your Sprintax account, choose the year, and underneath the year, then there's a radio button that says, I need to amend a tax return that I've already submitted. So if you tick that, we'll
Mm.
guide you through the process on how to do that. We'll ask for the information we need and we'll generate the relevant form for you, the 1040X and the correct non resident tax return.
Got it. So far, I think we've talked about three scenarios. Number one is someone who generated an income and has to file taxes. Someone who did not generate an income does not have to file taxes but have to file this form stating that, hey, I did not make this income, but here's this form, and I'm just saying that I'm non-resident alien. Here's the form. And then the third category is someone made an error in the past and they want to catch up on and file an amendment that, yes, IRS, I made this mistake, I filed a wrong form, but here's an exact form. And all three can be done through Sprintax. And I'm hoping that we can show all three scenarios in this podcast, that if you were to do this, then this is the process. If you were to do form 8843, this is the process. And if you were to amend it, then this is the process.
Exactly. Yeah, happy to show that. And I suppose the Sprintax questionnaires you'll see when we go through that, it's adaptive based on the answers to the questions you give. So it can be different for everybody depending on the information you're entering there. But we'll definitely give you a good overview of what it looks like and what to expect.
Yes. I know people are probably waiting. Is like, Yudi, stop talking. Just get to the overview. But I have one more question before we get into the walkthrough. Hey, before we move on to the next part of the video, I want to quickly talk about our newsletter community, which you can be part of absolutely free. We are now going strong and we have more than 40,000 people in our newsletter community. So imagine 40,000 people are receiving my newsletter every single week, twice a week, where I break down all of the stories that we did and make it a valuable resource for you. So if you're someone who doesn't have time to watch this and you just want to get an email with all of the resources into an email, that is the place to be. I'll put the link in the description. I'll give you some example. This is the one for Tanvi, where how she got 2 co-ops and she paid off her entire master's fees. This is an example of Maya, where she got 3 co-ops and she paid off her fees plus a little bit of savings. Here is an example of Sahil, who got his green card in 3 years. Here is an example where we shared bunch of resources on job hunting. So I promise this is going to be valuable resource for you, and it doesn't cost you anything. If you want to be part of our newsletter community, Link will be in the description, or you can go to link.udj.com/newsletter. This is the URL. And now I'll let you enjoy the video. What happens if I made an income but also invested in stocks? Because as an F1 student, I am eligible to invest. And if I invested into, let's say, a Robinhood or some text trading, like stock trading app, and bought some stocks, maybe generated like a capital gain tax, I'm assuming, if they sold it or not. And what, at that point of time, do I still have to report that?
Absolutely, yeah. And chances are, if you've made a gain on any of these things, you'll receive an income document, likely a 1099 form, maybe a 1099 DIV, a 1099 INT, 1099B. There's so many different 1099 forms there that may be relevant to it. So based on the type of income you've generated there, you'll get that income document and you will be able to upload it in step 3 in Sprintax, and we will include that then in your tax return. Make sure you're fully compliant.
Got it. Okay. Now I'm ready. I'm like, okay, I think I understand this. I am going to start opening Sprintex. Are there documents that I should have it handy before I start the process?
Yeah, a great question. So, yeah, it is important that you do have all of your income documents to hand. So, whatever US income you've received as a non resident, you're only going to be reporting your US source income. So, if you've received wages from an on campus employment, for example, or if you've received a taxable scholarship or tax treaty exempt income, for example, that would be reported on a 1042-S. It was really important to ensure that you have your income documents to hand when you're sitting down to prepare your taxes. You do need to provide details of all of your US source income on your tax return. So it might be a W-2 for wages or salary that you've received from an on-campus employment, for example. Could be a 1042-S document if you've received a taxable scholarship, or if you had tax treaty exempt income, for example, or maybe a 1099 if you've had some of those investment incomes, or maybe rental income, or anything considered miscellaneous income. So make sure that you do have your income documents to hand. You'll also need to have your passport details, your visa details, have all of that information with you. But then it's literally just a case of sitting down, entering that information. We'll bring you through step by step. It's very straightforward. Enter your information there, and we will work everything out then in the background. We'll determine what your obligations are. We'll determine your residency. We'll check to see if there's any tax treaty benefits available. We'll prepare the relevant forms for you then. So everything will be prepared, pre-filled for you, and you literally then just have to follow the instructions that we'll provide you with.
Sorry, I know I said last question, but two more
Okay.
questions follow. One, is it, what if I start, how long do you think, like, let's say I have all the documents and I started the process, how long does it take from the time? Why is it like an hour long process, 2 hour long
It's
process?
not that long, thankfully. So I suppose if it's a case you've triggered the federal and the state filing requirement from start to finish, when you sit down with Sprintax, you're going through the questions, you're providing everything we need. It'll probably take you maybe 30 to 40 minutes to get through from start to finish if you've triggered, the full federal and state filing obligation. If not, it could be much quicker. If you haven't received any income at all and it's just Form 8843 that we're creating for you, that's going to be much quicker.
Got it. Okay. And then what if, as we are going through and the form, and I'm like, I got an important call or an urgent call, and I need to pause and I need to come back maybe today or later today or tomorrow. Will it save, or do I have to do this all over
It'll
again?
save. Absolutely. It'll save your
Okay.
progress. So you don't need to go back in and enter all of that information again. When you log back in, you'll be able to start from where you left off. Your information will be saved, so gonna
Got
save
it.
you some time.
Eh, And as you speak more, I have more
That's fine.
questions. So just bear with all the people I know. They are all waiting for seeing the walkthrough. But so one, you mentioned scholarship. So I know a lot of international students would receive like merit-based scholarship, like 50% scholarship on their tuition
Mhm.
fees. Um, is that something they have to report? Because it's not necessarily like they're getting money. They're just getting waived off from the tuition fees. Again, I don't know how it works, but is that something, what form would they receive if they got something like
Yeah,
this?
so I suppose in terms of scholarships, it depends on what that scholarship covers. So if it's going to cover just tuition, then that's not considered income. It's not a taxable scholarship. It's not reportable on the non-resident tax return. You wouldn't receive an income
Got
document likely. Now, if the scholarship covered anything outside of tuition or tuition related expenses, so let's say it covers room and board, transport to and from school, meals, anything outside of tuition, then it is considered income. It is taxable, it is reportable, and you'll likely receive, it could be reported on a 1042S document. So you may receive a 1042S document to report that scholarship income. So if your scholarship covers just your tuition, then it's not reportable. It's not going to trigger the federal filing requirement. If you didn't receive any other US income, then it's just Form 8843 that you'd need to submit. But if your scholarship did cover anything outside of tuition, it will trigger the federal filing requirement, and maybe state, depending on the situation, depending on the income level, the state, and so many other factors. But again, Sprintax would work all of that out.
Yeah. I know at least for India and US, they have a tax treaty where we are exempted from FICA taxes, Social Security and Medicare tax. Um, I am not supposed to pay this, but maybe my university didn't know when I was doing my on-campus job or my first year of OPT, which I'm working on internship, they deducted those taxes. Is it possible for me to get refund, and do I get refund from government or do I get refund from my
Yeah, that's a
employer?
great question. So I suppose FICA taxes, if you're in the US at the age of 65 and need assistance with your medical bills, FICA tax will assist with that. But the thinking is, as a non-resident international student in the US, you're probably not going to be in the US at the age of 65 to benefit from that. So for that reason, if you're on an F1 or a J1 visa and you're non-resident, you're exempt from paying FICA taxes. But like you said, Judy, in some cases, the employer may deduct FICA, they may not be aware. So what we'd always say is check your W-2. There will be a section on there that will say FICA, Social Security, Medicare. And if tax has been withheld under those categories and you're on an F1 or a J1 visa as a non-resident, then you can definitely claim that back. Now, the first port of call we'd say is ask the employer for a refund. That's the quickest way to get your refund back. But if they're not in a position to issue that, or if that doesn't work out, you can definitely submit a FICA application to the IRS via Form 843 and 8316, because you will get that back. That is your money. If you've had that withheld in error, definitely claim that back. And again, that is something Sprintax can assist with if needed. We can prepare that FICA application for you.
Okay, I mean, you already answered. I was going to ask, is there something like, say, if I reached out to employer and they said, like, sorry, we already sent that your money which we withheld to government, so we can't refund you, but you will have to claim it in your taxes. So I'm assuming that is something
Absolutely.
Sprintax
Yeah,
can
we
do.
will certainly assist with getting those FICA refunds back.
Okay, cool. All right, I am excited now to see how the whole process works. We have to cover 4 different scenarios: FICA exemption, the normal 1040 NR, which is maiden income. If I have some other 1099 dividends or stocks or something like that, so that category, 8843 and
Okay,
amendment.
perfect. So let me share my screen if you can't see it at any stage.
Yep.
Um, okay, so what you'll do is you visit sprintax.com or use the link that Yudi's provided to access Sprintax, and it's going to bring you to the Sprintax homepage here. So what you're going to do is go to the login button, hover over personal, and click on returns. We're going to log in using your email or password. You can create that. If you haven't used Sprintax before, you click the Get Started button and we'll guide you through creating your account.
There we go.
Okay, perfect. So once you've logged in, then this is where you're going to end up. So we're in the 2024 tax year here. We're going to click Get Started. If you believe that you should have received a Form W-2 or a Form 1042S and you've not yet received it, please contact the institution that made payments to you to request this form. So as I mentioned earlier, it is really important that you do have your income documents to hand when you're sitting down to prepare your taxes. So we're just screen here.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So once you've logged into your Sprintax account, this is where you're going to end up. So we'll see here, okay, 2024, this is what we're pre-selected.
Mhm.
Now, if I was to go, because I've already gone through this file and we've got some information in there, I can edit it or I can just view it. Um, if I needed to amend this tax return, this is the radio button I was talking about. I want to correct my 2024 tax return that I've already sent to the IRS. I'd tick that button there as well. But in this instance, we're just going to go through as standard. So let's go in, we'll edit. It'll bring us in then into the questionnaire. Again, because I've pre-filled some of this information, I just need to go back to the start to show you what that looks like.
Mhm.
But the first thing, as I mentioned earlier, in step one, we'll always determine if you're resident or non-resident for tax. So we're going to ask you the information we need to work that out. So have you been a US citizen by birth or naturalization on the last day of 2024? Have you ever been a green card holder? Have you ever applied for US citizenship or lawful residence? Then we're going to ask, were you in the US during the 2024 tax year? We're going to ask, when was your first visit to the US? So that is your very first visit. That's not just your first visit on your current visa. This is your very first visit. So
Mhm.
this might have been when you visited the US with your family on vacation 10 years ago, so it's your very first visit. We'll ask if you're still in the US, and then we're going to ask you to provide details of all of your visits since you started coming in this year. So it is important that you do provide details of all of your entry and exits in and out of the US since that first visit. We will then determine if you're resident or non-resident. Now, in this case, you're moving on, actually, you're providing your visa details. So it's part two of the residency section, provide details of your current visa. So that information needs to be entered. So once you provide this information, and you'll see, like, if there's anything you're not sure of, the date you first entered the US, you'll see this little information bubble. This date should match the date of your first ever trip to the US from the visits list on the previous screen, regardless of your current visa type. So the date you first entered needs to match that date you provided on that previous screen.
Mm.
Um, Country of residence before you entered the US. So you'll choose your country of residence. And again, we give an explanation there as to why we're asking that question. You'll see you proceed through each of the steps with the little green arrow at the bottom here. But you'll also notice as we go through these screens, on every page throughout this questionnaire, once you're logged into your Sprintax account, you've got these two support options at the bottom. So this green chat bubble, this is the 24/7 live chat. It's available throughout tax season. So as you're going through here, if you've got any questions, you can come in here, type in your question. The chat bot will attempt to answer your question firstly. If that's unsuccessful, it'll transfer you through to a live agent. The other support option here then is the help center. So when you click on that, it brings you in. Are you seeing? Actually, share this tab. So once you click that support option on the previous page, this is where it'll bring you is into the Sprintax Help Center. You can type in your question and it'll give you the resource that relates to the question you've asked. So there's tons of resources in here. There's previously recorded webinars, FAQs, get started section. We have step-by-step guides on each step throughout the questionnaire, on the type of information that we're asking you for. So that's a great resource, if you do have any questions as you're going through there.
Mm.
So this is what's under this. Perfect. Okay, so once you reach step two, that means you are considered non-resident for tax purposes. If you had been in the US long enough to be considered resident, we would have stopped you at step one. We wouldn't let you proceed to step two. We'll give you that pop-up message that says, hey, looks like you're resident for tax purposes. You need to submit a resident return. So we'll point you in the right direction. But once you get through to step two, you're non-resident for tax purposes, and we'll bring you through the rest of the questionnaire. We'll gather the information that we need to prepare the relevant tax forms for you. So in step two, and you'll see here, you'll see your progress as you go through, you'll see exactly where you
Mhm.
are. So in step two, getting to know you, we're going to gather your personal details, your first name, last name, date of birth, occupation, so on. Did you have US income? So this is a really important question. Did you have US income, wages, scholarship, or other payments in 2024? If you say yes to this, then we're going to ask you more information about the income you've received. We will bring you through step three, which is let's talk money. But if you say no to this question, then there's certain questions that we're not going to ask you. We're not going to bring you through step three. It's going to be a quicker process for you because you'll only need to submit Form 8843 in that case. But in
Mhm.
this case, we've received US income, so we're saying yes to that. Do you have a US tax identification number? If you say yes, we'll ask for the number. If you say no, we'll ask, do you want Sprintax to prepare an ITIN application for you for the fee of $19.95? So if you have received income, then obviously you need to submit a tax return. You're going to need a tax identification number to do that. If you don't have one and you want Sprintax to prepare it, we can prepare that W7 form for you, the ITIN application. And we'll
Mm.
give you detailed instructions then as well on what the next steps are. You will need to have your documents certified by a relevant person, and you can submit it then alongside your federal tax return. We'll then ask you if you're a full-time student in a US educational institution or a full-time intern trainee in the US. We'll ask if you're a degree candidate in a US educational institution. Are you on OPT or CPT? And again, you can get information on what that is here. We'll outline that for you. And then at any time during 2024, did you receive as an award, sell, exchange, gift, or otherwise dispose of any digital assets or a financial interest in a digital asset? So we'll say no to that for now. Then we're moving on to your address. So please note that Sprintax system only accepts English and Latin alphabetical letters. So we'll ask for your US address, we'll ask for your home address outside the US, and then we'll ask you to choose the address that you want to appear on your tax return and will be used for correspondence. So, if it's the US address you want to use or if it's the home address, you choose that. Is this your billing address? Yes or no? Then we're going to ask for your passport information, so your passport number and where your passport was issued by. And then, of course, your phone number. We'll ask for that, maybe so, absolutely. Okay, so once you've gone through the address section here in getting to know you, step 2, you're going to come into the marital status section. So again, we're going to ask, can you be claimed as a dependent on somebody else's tax return? Yes or no? Were you married on the last day of 2024? Your spouse's date of birth? And does your spouse have a US tax identification number? So again, depending on the answers you provide here, we could ask different questions. Then we're into step 3, and this is where you're going to enter details of the income that you've received. So you'll remember back in step 2 in getting to know you, we asked if you've received income in the US. You've said yes, so this is why you've come to this step, and we're asking then about details of the income that you've received. So tell us about the income documents that you've received in 2024. So you can choose the income document you've received. Maybe it's W-2, 1042-S, 1099, all the different types of 1099s that are there. And you choose the quantity of those documents. So if you worked for 2 different employers in 2024, then you would say 2 W-2s. You should receive a W-2 for each one. So in this case, we've received 1 W-2 document. We're going to proceed.
And as you are going through, I remember in my case when I had like 3 different on-campus jobs, and they were, even though I was working on campus, universities have different departments, and someone would be state government, someone would not be state government, and it's a private body of the university.
Mhm.
So they would generate different W-2s. So that's how you would receive two or three different W-2s, even though you are just working for campus. So I'm just,
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a great point because oftentimes you'll see maybe somebody that's working in the library and somebody working in the canteen. The
yeah.
canteen may have a completely external company, that are running that. So you'd receive a
Yeah.
W-2 then under them. So yeah,
Mhm.
so I suppose once you proceed then in, you've said you've received 1 W-2 form, this is where you'll arrive and you can simply browse your documents. You can drag and drop. So your W-2 form, your digital version of that document, or if you don't have a digital version of it, take a good clear photo of that document and you can drag and drop it in here. Now, what I would say is if you're uploading a picture of your document, always make sure once you've uploaded it that the information here has transferred correctly. Because sometimes, if your picture is not clear enough, it might not transfer exactly. So check,
Mhm.
make sure that your digital document or your picture matches the information that it has pulled from that in here. And if there's anything that needs to be edited, you can click in there, you can edit that information. So just check and make sure that the information has transferred correctly there.
Mhm.
So once that's okay, then you can move on and you're into the other income section. So income not reported anywhere else. So did you receive any other income from US sources that's not included or reported in the system so far? So, if you've received any income, maybe that's not on your W-2 or not on your 1042-S, maybe you've received gambling winnings, for example. It's something that
Mhm.
you should report, so you'd be saying yes here and you'd be entering that information in here.
And I was assuming this is where you would enter yes if you have invested in stocks and receive like a 1099 interest form because you or dividends if you they gave you like $5 dividend and it'll still generate that form. Is that correct?
Exactly. And even back prior to that, once you're in this section here where it's asking about the income documents you've received,
Hmm.
apart from the W-2, you can select your 1099 documents here and you'll enter it at this point. But I suppose,
Yeah.
in some
Mhm.
cases, there may be something that's not already included here that you might need to include then in the other income section.
And I also want to clarify one other thing is for my CPT audience or my OPT audience because there's those people are there, and sometimes you may work as a 1099 contractor. They might not want to hire you full time yet, and they say like, hey, this is a contract base and you are legally allowed to do that as a 1099 contractor. So you might not receive W-2 but might receive 1099 form from that employer, and that is what you would also put it over there instead of W-2 if you didn't work full time W-2 income but have like a contractor job.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, once you're finished on this section, just move on to the additional tax info, so other taxes and payments. So did you make any estimated tax payments during 2024, which you paid directly to the IRS yourself and not through your employer? Most likely going to be no there. Did you make any estimated tax payments to the state tax during 2024, which you paid yourself, not through your employer? And did you file any forms requesting an extension to file a tax return with the IRS? So you just need to go through these questions, provide your answers here. Did you file any forms requesting an extension to file taxes with the state tax office? Then your previous US tax returns. Have you filed a US tax return before? So if this is your second year or your third year, you're going to be saying yes to this, hopefully. Hopefully you filed in previous years. If not, if it's a case you need to catch up, you haven't filed, you can say no to that question. Please provide details of your most recently filed tax return. You can add the information in here. Did you claim state tax expenses on your 2024 tax return? So again, answer that here. Did you have any overpayment listed on your 2023 return? So you're looking back at your previously filed return, you're getting the information from there and answering these questions in this section. Now, if you've used Sprintax for previous years, you've seen when we logged in there first, you could see the previous years. You can view all of those previously filed tax returns. You can download those documents. You'll always have access to those. Then in terms of expenses, once you move on then into step 4, offset your expenses, we're going to ask for details of expenses that you may be able to deduct. Apologies, I see the
And your
camera just saw
yep.
the notification there again. So once you reach the expenses section, unfortunately there's very little in terms of expenses that can be claimed as a non-resident, but we will capture, anything that can be claimed, we'll ask you about it here. So charitable contributions, if you've made any charitable contributions, they can be included. Did you receive a Form 1095A? So these are related to your health insurance. So you can say yes or no to this. If you did, we'll ask for the copy of the 1095A and we'll include that. Absolutely. Yeah, no problem at all. So yeah, once you've gone on, then you're into step 5, which is about your college. So please complete the following information exactly shown on your Form DS 2019 or your I-20. So your college or university details and your program director details. So you'll find that information on your DS 2019 or your I-20. So just fill that information in here, the state, the address, the zip code, the phone number, the program director details, that needs to be included. Then your course and program details, so the name of your university, the course type, the major, and then family member statement for exempt individuals. Would you like to prepare and receive statement for exempt individuals, the Form 8843, for any of your family members on J2, F2, M2, or Q3 visas who didn't have US income? Sorry,
Mm.
Yudi, you were going to ask a question?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Okay. So yeah, if it's a case you've got a dependent, that's been in the US, present with you in the US in 2024, but they didn't receive any income, they too need to submit Form 8843 if they haven't received any income in the US. So you can include them here in that the Sprintax software will generate those dependent Form 8843s for you alongside your own tax return. So, okay, so you're about to change some information which you previously provided, right? That's fine. We're going to say yes to that and proceed on through. So we're at the state tax section. Now what's happening is it's transferring the information that you've provided so far, your personal information, your dates, that kind of thing, transferring it over to the state tax piece. So it's going to save you a bit of time on the state tax side. So we've successfully transferred your federal information, so a big part of your state return is already done. So you can proceed on to next.
And what happens if I'm in one of those taxes where there are no income tax?
If you're in a state where there's no state tax, well then
Yep.
it won't even bring you through to this piece. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, exactly. So in here, we're asking, please provide details of each state you've lived in during 2024. So this should include any period spent outside the US if applicable. So note that if you're not able to list the periods you were outside the US in 2024 correctly, you may need to review and change the entry and exit dates that you've entered in the first step in residency. So the information
Mm.
you're putting in here needs to match the dates, the entry and exit dates that you provided in step one. So here in the state tax section, we're asking you for your entry date to the state, the exit date, the state you've lived in. So apologies, I actually answered that incorrectly, Yudi. In terms of if you're in a state where there's no state tax, you do still need to fill this page in, and it'll determine then if you've triggered a state filing requirement or not. So we know Florida, there's no state tax, but we're asking for the details, the entry date, the exit date, the state. We'll ask for the type of accommodation, the type of visit, and you do that for any state that you visited or lived in during the year. And you'll see here we've got a period of outside the United States. So this person left the United States on this date, between this date and this date, and they stayed in a hotel or motel room. It was a temporary visit. So they are.
And what's the purpose for this? Is this to figure out if you are a resident for that specific state?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
So the state tax rules are different. They vary from state to state. You could be
yeah.
considered non-resident for federal taxes, and you could be considered resident for state taxes. So that's why it's
Yes. Yeah.
important to provide details of your entry and exit dates in and out of the state. We'll then work out if you're resident, non-resident, maybe part year resident for the state, and we'll determine then what your filing obligations are here.
And just to go slightly deeper, and you may not know the answer to this, and you may have to get CPA to help us. But what happens if 11 months I was in California, where it does have a state income tax, and like you said, then I moved to Texas because that's where my job is, and I had to go and move, relocate there, which has no state income tax,
Mhm.
which might be only 30 days. So at this point, am I eligible for no state income tax, or do I still fill the tax because I was resident? Or like, how does that work?
Yeah, so like it's hard to answer a question like that, I suppose, on a session like this without having all of the information, the entry and exit dates and so on. But once you provide the information in here, we'll work all of that out for you. So, if you spent a
Hmm.
30-day period in the state, the chances are you're going to be considered non-resident for that state. Depending then on the income level, the rules for that state, what the thresholds are,
Yeah.
and so on, there's a lot of
Yep.
things to consider. So impossible to answer that question on a
Yeah. Yeah.
session
Yeah.
like this, but that's what the software will do. It'll work everything out. It'll determine then, if you've triggered one state filing requirement, maybe two. Sometimes we've had in certain circumstances, we've had individuals who've triggered 4 and 5 state filing requirements.
Oh,
They've
wow.
moved around a lot. It doesn't happen very, very often, but we definitely had one year where we had an individual who had triggered 5 state filing requirements in that year. Now, they may not have
Hmm.
owed tax in the state, in each of those states, but they had to file a state tax return for those years, for that
Hmm.
year.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Got it.
Okay, so yeah, once you've provided the details of your visits or your stays within the states, we will summarize then, okay, so we've reviewed your information. We found that you need to file a tax return for New York. So it's a tick box scenario. If you decide, okay, well, I'm going to have Sprintax prepare my federal return, I have another way to prepare my state, that's fine. You can untick it and we'll just prepare the federal return. But if you leave that box ticked and proceed, we'll prepare the federal and the state forms for you. So click on to next. So we're asking you for more information then about the New York state return. So did you maintain living quarters in the United States? We'll ask for the address. Did you maintain this address for the entire year? Is it still maintained by you? Fee paid for the tax preparer in 2024 to prepare your 2023 income tax return. So the fee that you would have paid to prepare your tax return last year, that is tax deductible. That can be included here. Did you move in 2024 to a new home within the US because you have a new principal workplace? And again, move on to the next step. Vita volunteer, so this is the summary piece. Do you have a Vita volunteer helping you to prepare your tax return? Yes or no? You're going to say no there because Sprintax is doing that for you. And then let's review your numbers. So for the federal taxes, based on the information that you've provided up until this point, the information on your W-2 and so on, we determine here that there is a refund available of $3,351. Now we'll have taken into account if there's tax treaty benefits and so on available, so this will be an accurate figure. You'll also have the state figures worked out for you. So let's move on to the state. And in the New York State return, so your income is outlined here, the tax deducted, the final amount of tax. In this case, there is a small underpayment of $269 for the state. So we'll outline all of that for you. So you'll know before you get to the end of the process if there's a refund due, if it's a tax liability, that'll all be outlined. So once you click next, great, you're almost finished. Before you proceed, please confirm that all the information you provided is correct and that you've included all of your income documents. If you've made a mistake or you've forgotten to include something, click no and then you can go back and correct the information. If everything is okay and you don't need to make any changes, click yes to finalize your order. So let's do that. Okay, so again, the federal review, you're due a tax refund on the federal side, $3,351. How would you like to receive your refund? So transfer to US bank account, receive check by mail, or credit towards next year's return. So you have those options. Now, we'd always recommend that you keep, if you're leaving the US or if you've left the US, maybe you've returned home already, we'd always say try and keep your US bank account open until you've received your tax refund. It's the quickest and safest way to receive that refund. So US bank account is the best option. You can have your check sent by mail, if you're still in the US. If you're outside the US, I wouldn't recommend that because in a lot of cases your foreign bank account, may not accept the US check. So, always, if possible, keep your US bank account open. So then we're moving on to the state taxes. So in this case, you owe some tax to the IRS. So how would you like to, well, this is asking about a refund, but in this case, we know it's an underpayment. So we'll actually tell you, okay, so if you owe state taxes, how would you like to pay it? Check or money order or credit or debit card. So we give you the options to either receive a refund or to make payment if there's payment owed. You select the option and we'll provide you with details in the cover letter then that we provide with your tax pack on what those next steps are. Now, the post-filing support, this is an optional. You don't have to add this. This is, I suppose, after filing your tax return, some non-residents may receive a notice from the IRS or the state that the return is under review and that they might look for additional documents. If you want Sprintax to communicate with the IRS on your behalf, if you want them to act as the middleman and sort all of this out for you, there is the option there of adding the post-filing service. So the full service covers your federal and state. You could have just federal, you could have just state, or you don't have to include any of them. So I'd like to handle all I'd like to handle all post communications with the IRS myself at no additional cost. So let's choose that. Okay. Sprintax forms then. If you were starting a new job in the US and you wanted to ensure that you're taxed correctly, you can actually use Sprintax forms to generate those pre-employment tax forms for you. the W4,
Nice.
the 8233, the W8 Ben, to ensure that you have the correct federal tax withheld, that you have any tax treaty benefits you're entitled to, and so on. So you can choose that, get taxed correctly if you're changing employment and if you need help with those forms. If not, you just proceed without Sprintax forms. So these are optional, you don't have to add any of these. They're just there if you do need that additional support. Okay, so proceed. And here we are at the order breakdown. So in this case, this person has triggered the federal and the New York state filing requirement, and you'll see the fees associated with them. Now, in this account, I've already used a demo code in here, which covers the full federal fee. So you can see it says paid here and the 54.95 is minused. But in your case, what you'll do is you'll enter the code Yudi in here, click validate, and that's going to remove $5 from this federal fee. You then pay the
Mm.
balance yourself, in by card at the next page. If you've triggered a state filing requirement, that's something you'd cover yourself. So your discount code will provide a $5 discount on this federal fee. So let's move forward with that.
And it doesn't take the money from my refund. I will still have to pay, and then refund will come back to my bank account or however.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good question. So no, it's the fee is something that you would need to pay yourself up front. The refund then would be issued afterwards. So your federal refund will come from the IRS. If you do a state refund, that will come directly from the state. And that will be sent either into your bank account or sent by check or whatever option it was you chose in that piece. So
Got it.
at this point, anything that's left to be paid, you'll pay at checkout. Those down everything, video still on. Okay, so once you've made the fee payment, you arrive here at your download files page, your finalized page. You can see here
Mhm.
then that your next steps are to download your tax forms. So you've got your federal, you've got your New York state, you can view them or you can download them. So if you download them, we'll download the federal pack firstly, show you what that looks like.
Comes to the download thing. Yep.
Exactly. And when you download your documents, then are you seeing this? Actually, sorry. Okay, so
Yep. Now I see
perfect. So once you got to that finalized page, you've got your pack there, it's available to download. You download your documents, and this is what it's going to look like. So we're going to provide you with a cover letter. Okay, so you've got your tax summary here, filing
it.
status, other married non-resident alien, so filing separately, total gross income, refund amount, all outlined there. How much is my refund? Outlined. How do I file my tax return? So your tax return must be received by April 15th. However, we recommend that you mail your federal return as soon as possible. We give you the address to send it to. So that's all outlined there. When will I receive my refund? We'll give you an idea as to the time frame there. And then your tax return checklist. So your 1040 NR, you need to sign it on page 2. Your W8 Ben, which we'll provide that form for you. You sign that on page 1 if present. And form 8843, no need to sign when it's attached to the 1040 NR. So we're telling you what your next steps are. Attach copies of your income and your tax withholding statements showing the US source income you've used. So you need to include a copy of your W2. Confirm that the SSN on your W2 is correct. So it's really important that you do read through this, read through the cover letter, follow those instructions. We give you some of the FAQs covered in here as well, just for handiness. But then you're into your actual completed tax pack. So here's the federal return for Anna Fitzpatrick for 2024. Sign and mail, send it to the IRS. So here we are, the 1040 NR for 2024. It's pre-filled, so all of the information is pre-filled there. We've told you previously
Mhm.
that this needs to be signed on page 2. So here we are at page 2. You're going to sign it here. Then, your any other relevant documents. Here's your 8843 pre-filled. Form 8843 will be provided for everybody. If there was no income, then it'll just be Form 8843. If you did receive US income, then it's the federal return, but Form 8843 will be included with that. Again, everything's pre-filled there. Doesn't need to be signed when it's been submitted with this. And this is your copy. So that first copy we looked at is the one you're sending to the IRS. And here's a copy for yourself. So if you're printing it off, you have a printed copy of that yourself. So you'll see it says copy across the documents. and the 8843 there as well. And there you are. That's your full completed federal tax pack. So let's go back into the download files page. So we've downloaded the federal pack. Perfect. Great. In this case, actually, this tax return is not ready immediately. It's been prepared offline. And what will happen is this individual will receive an email to let them know when their completed tax return is available in their Sprintax account. And they just go back in and download it when it's available. So once it's ready, once it's uploaded in the account there, they'll have the full tax pack, similar to the federal return. We'll give them the instructions. You know, you need to
Mm,
print this, you need to sign it, you need to mail it to this address with a copy of whatever income documents are needed.
mm.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, once you've got to that stage, you've downloaded your tax packs, you've mailed those forms, you've done everything you need to do in terms of being tax compliant.
Nice. And so there is no way for us to e-file this.
Yeah, there is absolutely. So if it was a case that you met the IRS criteria to e-file, you would see an option here that would give you, like there would be a blue option like this download button. You'll see it up here. It'll say proceed to e-file. In this case, unfortunately, we haven't met the criteria to e-file the federal return. Now that could be, there's
Oh,
many
yeah.
reasons why that might happen. Now we do have a detailed blog post, and let me show you. Okay, so I'll share this tab instead. If we go to Sprintax, if we go to blog, and if we type in e-file, we'll get that blog post. And in here, we do have the list of limitations as to why somebody might not qualify to e-file their federal return. So down
That's
here,
interesting because I realized everyone is qualified for e-file, but actually there are rules for this. So
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, not everybody will qualify to e-file. So say somebody who doesn't have a social security number, just has an ITIN, they couldn't e-file. Or if any of
mm,
their names or social security numbers doesn't coincide with the information provided in step 2, getting to know you, again, that would stop them e-filing. Or if
mm,
their 1042-S form doesn't have a unique code identifier, you'll see there's 14 different reasons
yeah,
here why somebody might not qualify for that. Yeah, but
got it.
if they don't qualify, they just won't see the e-file option. There'll be no e-file option here. They'll just see the options to download the packs. But if they
And there
do,
will Yeah, and there are instructions like where you need to sign, and like you basically then go to either FedEx or USPS or whatever, and then just mail your document to IRS.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, that's it. So yeah,
Got it.
if they do meet the IRS criteria to e-file, Sprintax will recognize it and will provide that option here. If they don't see it, it doesn't mean they've done anything wrong. They just haven't
Yep.
met the IRS
Yeah.
criteria. Yeah,
In this case, when we walk through, you didn't enter SSN and or ITIN number, so that's
exactly,
probably why. Gotcha.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. This was extremely helpful. I feel like now I know from start to end, like what I need to do. And of course, there's a live chat option so people can, if they're stuck and they're like, okay, I need to ask this question, like, what do I need to fill? Here's my situation. Hopefully
Hmm.
that'll help them as well.
Absolutely.
What happens if I didn't have W-2 income and I need to just do 8843?
Okay, so again, we'll go back here to step 2, to the About You section. And in this question where we're asked, do you have US income, wages, scholarship, or other payments in 2024? If you say no to that, okay, so you do not need to file a tax return as you do not have to complete Form 1040 NR. You still have a filing requirement. Please proceed with the application in order to have Form 8843, Statement for Exempt Individuals, prepared. You need to file this form with the IRS. So we're telling you, okay, you haven't received US income, you don't trigger that federal filing requirement, but you do still need to submit Form 8843. So we'll say okay to that. Now, because I've already finalized this and generated the tax pack, hopefully it'll still let me go through to do this. Okay, so did you have US income? We're saying no. Did you have a US tax identification number? We'll leave that as no. Are you a full-time student? That's all fine. We'll proceed with the same information. You're about to make changes. So because we've already completed the returns with the W-2, we're now saying
Mm,
we don't have it. We're changing it. So we'll say okay to that. And you'll see here
Yeah,
We're
everything
everything
disabled.
else, yeah, like pretty much you no need to enter any of that income details. So we're
Mm,
asking for your address, the usual, the passport information. You're proceeding on from there,
mm.
and it's very straightforward in this case. We've skipped past the let's talk money. The expenses were straight into the college, then the college details. So you're entering
Mm.
your information for your college, your course, family member exempt Form 8843s, and literally you're straight through to the end then where it's just Form 8843, and you'll make the payment here yourself. The
Nice.
code, the $5 federal discount code, won't work on Form 8843. It'll work on the 1040 NR.
Got it. Okay. Nice.
Okay.
Right. And then I think at the very beginning, it talked about if you were wanting to amend your, last year or whichever year you want to amend, you made a mistake and I want to amend 2023, for example, you use TurboTax and they file 1040. So that's where you would go in the beginning.
Exactly. And sorry, I just want to go back here and make sure that we say yes to this again, just to bring everything back to normal. But okay, so let's say, okay, we're going to sign out of here for the moment. Let's say we're logging back in from the beginning. We're going back in. We need to amend a tax return. So we'll sign in, we'll get started, and then we'll choose the year we want to amend. So let's say we want to amend 2023. The amendments for 2024 aren't open yet. That won't be until after the tax filing deadline. But
Yeah.
2023 you can do now. So we'll click 2023, choose I want to correct my 2023 return that I've already submitted. So we'll say yes to that and we'll edit. And we'll
Mm,
bring you through the questionnaire then, asking for the information that we need, to generate that 1040X for you.
got it. Okay. And then I think the final one was FICA tax exemption. If we have already paid that, how do we get it back?
Yeah, so I suppose in this case, it's not going to be quite as easy to show because the W-2 that we've entered in this test account didn't have FICA withheld. But if that
Mm,
W-2 had FICA tax withheld on it, and if this person is saying yes, they're an F1 or a J1 student, and we determine in step one that they're non-resident, then we will say to them, okay, so we see you have FICA withheld, have you received this FICA refund already? If they say no to that, we'll ask if they want Sprintax to prepare that FICA application for them.
got it. Okay. Is there additional fees for that or just covers in the
There would
federal?
there would be a fee for FICA, and that'd be $19.95.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, still better than receiving additional refund.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Again, Elvira, this was so helpful. Like I feel I'm. It's a masterclass on how to do taxes. A lot of information. Are there common mistakes that you've seen?
So yeah, I suppose in terms of common mistakes, some of the big things is somebody not filing the correct tax return. So maybe they're
Mm,
non-resident, they're going in and they're filing a resident tax return. Really important that they are filing a correct tax return based on their residency status. So,
mm,
if they're unsure, go in and complete step one in Sprintax and we'll work that out. Another big mistake is not filing at all. Maybe being in the US and, assuming, okay, well, I didn't receive any income, I didn't work, I don't have a
mm,
scholarship, I'm just studying, I don't need to do anything. They do, they need to complete at least Form 8843. Other mistakes then maybe not including all of their income, maybe sitting down with their W-2, entering that information, submitting their return, and then maybe weeks later receiving a 1042S document and they've
mm.
already submitted the return and not included that information. So not including all of their information on their tax return. In that case, they need to amend it to correct that. Um, Leaving it maybe too late to file, and leaving it so close to that deadline that they may be missing some information. Do give yourself time. Do it as soon as you've got your income documents, you've got everything you need. Sit down and do it now. Don't wait until closer to that April 15th deadline. Give yourself time in case there's anything else you need, in case you have any questions, there's anything you need to follow up on. Give yourself time for that.
And
Not,
if in whatever reason, I am on April 14th and I'm looking at the date and I'm like, oh my gosh, I am running late, I don't think I'll be able to get everything ready to file tomorrow. I know people can file extension. Does Sprintax help filing an extension?
Yeah, we can help with that, absolutely. But I suppose at that stage, if it's April 14th and it's due on April 15th, if you can go in, fill in your information, if you've got everything you need, get it done then. Get it in the mail once it's postmarked by that April 15th deadline, even though it may be a little later arriving at the IRS, once it's postmarked by that April 15th date, it'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Got it.
I gonna say, sorry, I forgot what I was gonna say, but I suppose just for anybody that might be submitting their tax returns from outside the US, maybe on a J1 visa, returned back home, no longer in the US, still need to file, and you can do it from
Mhm.
anywhere using Sprintax anywhere in the world. If they qualify to e-file, it'll be filed electronically for them. If they've got a state filing requirement, they will need to mail it. So if they're doing it from outside the US, definitely give yourself more time for those documents to arrive on time. So if you're doing it outside the US, give yourself that bit more time and get your returns in the mail as soon as you can.
Amazing. Cool. Again, thank you, Elvira. This was so helpful. I can't wait to do more of this with you again at any time. So I'm again very excited for people to use this, and hopefully they find it helpful. I'm gonna encourage them to ask any questions they have in the comment section, and then depending on what they ask, we might do like a follow up session. Like, okay,
Of course.
Elvira, like we did this, and it generated 1,000 other questions. So let's answer those questions as well.
Absolutely, of course. Happy.
All right. And again, Alvira, thank you so much for doing this. I will see you in the next one. But until then,
Keep smiling and keep hustling.
nice.